day to everyone. My name is Matthew T. Sabasales. I am a science teacher from Zamboanga del Sur National High School, and this is actually my first video tutorial on science lessons, and I am actually recording this to help you out with your lessons in science, especially in grade 7. So, the first topic that I'm going to discuss with you would be about soil formation and weathering. So as you can see in our screen, there you have the title, Soil Formation and Weathering. But before we will start with our discussion, let me have this short review with you with regards to the previous lesson that you have discussed with your science teacher. So I believe your science teacher have already discussed with you these things. So if you can still recall, before this concept, probably you might remember the lessons which were introduced with you by your teacher about the different land and water resources in the Philippines. So I will give you a few minutes to think and recall what are those things that you have learned from your lesson on land and water resources in the Philippines. Okay? Are you done? Can you still recall? Let us try to find out if you can still remember valleys, hills, and plateau. So, try to think of the things that you have discussed on this. How about mountains? Non-volcanic mountains in the Philippines. Can you still recall some examples of non-volcanic mountains in the Philippines? How about active volcanoes? Rivers. And we have lots of rivers in the Philippines, especially in our locality here in Zamboanga del Sur area, wherein we can also enumerate several rivers, lakes, as well as lakes. Now there is a famous lakes nearby that is actually few minutes, I think less than 30 minutes ride from Pagadian City towards the location. I think you can still remember the lakes which were mentioned by your teacher during your discussion about lakes, and perhaps watersheds. So if you can still recall, let me show you your handouts. This one is the handouts that you have used during your discussion on the different natural resources in the Philippines, especially land resources and water resources. If you can recall, the lithosphere, that is actually the solid portion of the earth, which is made up of different rock layers. So we have here some examples of active volcanoes. No, we have the Mount Mayon, Mount Pinatubo, Titaal volcano, Mount Bulusan, Hibok-Hibok, Mount Apu, Hiraya. So maybe you can still recall this. And who can forget about the different non-volcanic mountains, Mount Pulag. And here, nearby, in our locality, we have Mount Malindang, Mount Pinukis in the Luzon Valley area. We have the Aurora Hills of Bohol. These are non-volcanic mountains. And another thing that I would like you to shortly recall is the difference between plains, valleys, and plateaus. Can you still figure out what's the difference between valleys, plateaus, and plains? Basically, when we talk about valley, it is actually a plain. It is a flat land located between two hills. Between two hills. So, seems like if there are two hills over here, the plain is in between. The valley, that is actually in between two hills. And we have the famous Leson Valley in our area here in Pagadian City. Plateau is, on the other hand, is a plain on a top of a certain hill. So you can look into this figure over here. That is actually the plateau. But when you talk about plain, there is no nearby mountains or hills. It's just flat land. And we have several known Valley, no? The Trinidad Valley, which is also known as the Salad Bowl of the Philippines. Cagayan Valley, and all of this, you can still recall this one. Seas, we have the famous uh, Philippine Sea. No, I think that is the nearest sea that we have, no? And we also are facing the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth. And another thing, water resources in the Philippines could include several lakes. We have the Laguna de Bay, and the famous, the one that I am talking about a while ago, Lake Wood. No, are you familiar with that? I think there is already a built-in resort there, and people are actually visiting this particular resort, and they've enjoyed with that particular view in the lake. We have Mainit in Surigao del Norte, Pulangi Lake in Bukidnon, and you know what? I have really visited Pulangi Lake in Bukidnon. We have the Buhi Lake in Camarines Sur, no? And of course, rivers, another water resources in the Philippines. We have lots of rivers, especially here in Zamboanga del Sur area. Maybe you are familiar with lots of rivers here, but we could name some few bodies of water in the entire Philippines. We have the Davao River, we have the Cagayan, the Rio Grande de Cagayan, the biggest river in the Philippines. And falls. We have very beautiful falls in the locality. Maybe you have visited already Manga Falls in Pagadian, no? And the famous Pulacan Falls in Labangan. And these are actually the different falls. And one thing that you need to recall when you talk about land resources and water resources could be the combination of the two, which is actually what we call watershed. And watershed is actually very important because it aids in helping out different living things living on the area to continuously exhibit life characteristics, no? There are many interactions of living things in a certain watershed. And we have lots of watershed in the Philippines. Mount Apu in Davao and Cotabato, that is actually a type of watershed wherein the primary objective of watershed is to hold the water as it rushes down from the mountains towards the ocean. If you can see this illustration over here, this probably has been discussed with you by your science teacher, and it is actually, water is on a cycle in this region. There will be precipitation, rainings in the higher portions of the land, and water will rush down in the hills towards the ocean. And some of the water will go into the groundwater, and basically some of this water will evaporate, and there will be a cycle. What good with watershed is that it could probably help out plant organism and vegetations to survive on the area. And it also helps out in preserving the structure of the soil, the land on this particular area. So there are factors, if you can still recall, factors that affects the waters in a watershed. So these are vegetation cover, the plants which is actually living on the mountainous area in the slope of the area itself could be a big factor, because the steeper the slope of a watershed, the more the difficult for the watershed to hold the water, and it could prevent water from staying on the region, and eventually it could lose some of the living things living on those particular slopes. So it must be, no, the survival of a watershed is dependent on the slope. So dili siya pwedeng grabe kay ka stiff, dili po siya pwedeng grabe pud kay ka less ang ihang stiffness. So another factor that affects the water in the watershed is the kind of soil and the amount of rainfall in the area. So probably that those are just few things that you need to recall with regards to our previous topic on land resources and water resources in the Philippines. So this time, let us proceed to our major aim and our discussion here about Uh, these are the short review. We will be talking about soil resources. So again, in a few minutes, I'm going to give you a few things to think. What do you think is a soil? Unsa man gid para sa inyo ang soil? Unsa man gid yuta? Soil. What do you think is a soil? Okay. So let me give you the definition of soil. Soil is actually a mixture of minerals, organic matter, gases, liquids, and countless organisms together to support life on Earth. There you have the definition. So I have here a pen. I'm going to highlight, a highlighter. I'm going to use a highlighter. Minerals, organic matter, gases, liquids, and countless organisms together that together support life on Earth. So this is actually the definition of soil. Another definition of soil is this is also a natural known body, a body known as the pedosphere. So when we talk about pedosphere, we are talking about the soil on the lithosphere. So at the topmost layer actually in the lithosphere are soil. And it actually have several important functions. Soil have a very important function, roles to perform in supporting life on Earth. So what are these particular function? First, soil is a medium for plant growth, and it is a means for water storage and water supply purification. In fact, the reason why we have purified waters, especially on mineral waters, is due to the soil itself. The soil can purify the water and cleanse the water from impurities and from toxic substances. So that is also one role of the soil. And basically, another function of the soil is that it is an Earth atmosphere's modifier. The gases in the atmosphere is actually being produced. Some of these gases are produced by living things living in the soil. Because basically, the amount of carbon dioxide is dependent upon the number of animals and some other living things on the soil. So as they constantly live on the soil, it releases some kind of energy gas that could probably modify the atmosphere. The plants, no, that is why if we are going to destroy and damage all the plants, eventually the atmosphere will also be modified. Some of the gases there, the oxygen level could eventually decrease and everything will be affected. So soil is very important because this is actually the habitat also of some or most organisms is the habitat, and due to the staying of these particular organisms in the soil, eventually there could be releasing of different gases and it will eventually aid in modifying the entire Earth's atmosphere. So in turn, this organism would also modify the soil. Another definition of soil is that soil is accordingly formed when rocks and other materials near the Earth's surface are broken down by a number of processes, which collectively we call weathering. Muna gitawag na to weathering. So ang reason nga nung natay soil, it's because of the process of weathering. Later we will talk about weathering, but as for this time, let us be reminded that from the definition itself here in the statement that we have, when we talk about soil, soil really comes from rocks. So due to the process of weathering, rocks is being damaged and destroyed, and later on, it eventually degrade into the material that we know today as the soil. Okay. The next thing that we need to also understand is our primary idea of why soil is formed is based from the definition that we have a while ago. It's because of weathering. So what is this weathering? So basically, in the definition, weathering, this is also introduced already by your teachers during your elementary grades. When it say weathering, it is referred to the breaking down of rocks, soil, and minerals, as well as wood and artificial materials through contact with the Earth's atmosphere, water, and biological organisms. So there are factors that make contact with these rocks and soil and some other minerals, which lead these rocks and minerals to be broken down and form the soil itself. Which means that the primary reason why we have soil today, it's because of the process of weathering. There are two types of weathering. By the way, before that, weathering also describes the means by which soil, rocks, and minerals are changed by physical and chemical process into other soil components. So weathering could also aid, so we could think of two particular type of weathering, the physical weathering and the chemical weathering. So the physical weathering and chemical weathering aid in the process of the formation of other components of the soil. And weathering basically is an integral, meaning it's very important. It's an integral part of soil development. Depending on the soil formation factors in an area, weathering may proceed rapidly over decades or slowly over millions of years. So depending upon the availability of the different factors or materials that could aid weathering, pwede ang weathering mahitabo in several few decades only. 10 years, for example, it could lead into the breaking of rocks or the degradation of rocks to form soil. But in most cases, because we have a limited amount of materials in our natural environment, probably sometimes weathering will take place by millions of years. So there are two types of weathering, as what I've said, the physical and the chemical weathering. So what is this physical weathering? Let us try to look at physical weathering. So physical weathering is a term used in science that refers to a geological process. It's a geological process. When I say geo, the geo there in the word, kaning geo there, refers to earth. So the earth itself performs different by different processes. So this earth processes uh, allows rocks to break apart. So which means physical weathering is something like the breaking of the rocks due to several things exhibited by the earth itself without changing the chemical composition of the rock. So this is done over time, and few examples of these processes that could aid physical weathering could be the movement of the earth itself. Let me have my highlighter again. So the movement of the earth itself and environment that can break apart rock formations, causing physical weathering, movement of the earth, and several geological process. No? But the only thing, when you talk about physical weathering, there is no chemical change of the composition of the rock. So physical weathering can also refer to other things in the environment breaking down, like soil and minerals. So for example, one basic example of process that could aid in physical weathering of the rocks or the breaking of the rocks are pressure and temperature. Warm temperature inside our earth is actually filled with lots of magma. I think you know that already. And due to this tremendous heat inside our earth, in our inner core of the earth, it will push upward the rocks in the surface of the earth. So because of, maybe you know already that when you talk about heat, it could generate huge amount of pressure. And the pressure, the air that is there will expand and it will push upward the different rocks. So these rocks will eventually be broken down. And not in a chemical process, but in a physical process. That is what we call physical weathering. Water and ice can also exhibit physical weathering. Sometimes, water will constantly hit a certain rock or eventually some of this water will seep into the cracks of the rock, and it will eventually break the rock without uh, chemical change. It will just break the rock. No? Ice, for example, tremendous cold in the northern, in the southern pole probably, or in the temperate regions. This particular rock will eventually be frozen, and because of the freezing of this rock, it could just easily be broken down physically. So that's physical weathering. On the other hand, we have chemical weathering. So chemical weathering pertains to the changes in rock structure under the action or influence of chemical reaction. So not like with the physical weathering, in the chemical weathering, there is really a chemical reaction that could trigger into the change of the chemical composition or chemical structure of the rock itself. And eventually, it will lead into the formation of the soil. So chemical weathering is also the decomposition of rocks and minerals by various chemical process. So we can think of what are these chemical process. So let me introduce to you hydration, one example of a chemical weathering process. Hydration, the word hydra means water. So there is placement of water. Some of this water contains such different substances as acidic substance, or no, because basically the normal water that we have is actually neutral, but it also contains lots of substances and chemical compounds which could probably react with the substances present already in the rocks, and eventually they react together and triggers into the degradation and the breaking of the rock structure. Another example of process is oxidation. When you say oxidation, oxidation is the adding of oxygen, oxygen, so oxidation. This can also lead into making our rock. Later, we will talk about oxidation process. And another thing is carbonation, the adding of carbon into the rocks. Later, we will also be learning about carbonation and hydrolysis, the splitting of water molecules, because there are two molecules of hydrogen and one molecule of oxygen there in a water molecule. So hydrolysis, the breaking of this, and probably it could be due to several uh, uh, processes also exhibited by the natural environment. And when this particular things happens, it could also react into hydrogen, could react into the substances in the rock, and oxygen would also react, and there could be a tremendous chemical reaction that will take place inside the rocks, and the rock will break and eventually degrade. Later, it will become soil. Okay? So here is an example of a picture showing to us a chemical weathering process. As you can see, rocks eventually change in color due to the chemical reactions that exhibited in the surface of the rock. And if this constantly takes place, eventually this rock will break down and there could be breaking of the rocks. Factors that contribute weathering to occur. First, temperature, climate, living organisms, topography of the land, and time itself. So these are the 5 basic factors that contributes to the weathering process. Paano akong suga? Ngingit-ngit agad yun. Let me turn it on again. Okay. So, temperature. Let us try to look at temperature. As we all know, temperature controls how fast chemical reaction occur. So, there is this particular temperature na kung kana nga temperature mahitap mo occur on the rocks, it will eventually makapaspas siya. It will trigger fast chemical reaction into the rocks, and it will aid into the weathering of the rocks. So many chemical reactions proceed more quickly as temperature increases. So warm region soils are normally more developed or more mature than cold region soils. So mature soils have more silt and clay or near the surface. I don't have any other choice. Kinahingnan na gid akong suga. Ako na lang ning iduol ako ang cellphone. Oh, na kita ra. Dugay ta ani. Climate is the composite or generally prevailing weather condition of the region. So, the same thing, kung may climate, mag-think po tag temperature, gihapon ana, and air pressure, humidity, precipitation, kanang rain, sunshine, cloudiness, and winds throughout the year. If you average all of that over the year, then you can refer that as climate. So, this climate idea could aid also weathering of the rocks. Another factor are living organisms. So, unsa may mga living organism? Vegetation on the ground, kanang mga grasses nga nasa sa ground. Eventually, kung beneath the ground, there are many rocks, or actually the bedrock itself. There are cases where in this particular vegetation, these plants and these grasses could also release substances that could aid in the breaking of the rocks. And even some of these particular roots of these plants vegetations will seep into the cracks of the rocks and break the rock itself, forming again soil later on, several years after. And sometimes namamatay diha ang mga organisms, and the dead organisms could probably inikamatayan na nila. There are many chemical reactions that will take place in the body of the organic matter of the dead organism. It will react into the rock, and it will eventually aid in weathering. Life activities living on that rock. Mga living things. Animals, for example, mangihi diha, malibang na diha sa rocks, and eventually these particular substances could trigger into chemical weathering and even physical weathering. Tumba-tumba na sa mga elephant, for example, nga nga portion sa rock, bugat kay sila, mo crack gina siya. No? Uban nga mga tao, mag-create of different human activities in which it breaks the rocks. So these are actually factors that contributes to the human activities. There it goes. Then animal waste. Mga ihi, mga taing akong ingon, these are actually all contributors on the breaking and the weathering of rocks, forming soil. And another factor is the topography. Topography is actually the design or the structure of the land. So, natay mga terrain, for example, slopey hills and basins and flatlands. So, for example, I have here a triangle. So, if this is the land, slopey kay siya, kani siya, dugay ni siya probably diri ma-break ang rock dara. If this is the structure of the rock, dugay siya anuman. When substances will be poured into this region, some of this will just slide down towards the surface here, over here, ang tapok ng mga substance diha, so less kaya ang interaction dire. So dugay siya compared to this. Kana siya, kung nadiri ang mga substance na mabutang from organisms or from rain or from the atmosphere itself, it could directly trigger reactions over here. Chemical weathering will take place and physical weathering and the degradation of the rock, and eventually making this to become soil. But in this case, mas faster ni siya. Some of the substances will settle into this area, no? This portion over here. Mas grabe siya kay basin man ni siya. So depending upon the topography of the terrain of the land will probably give us a wider aid of how weathering will take place. Okay? So nisiga na padubalik akong suga. So time. So magkadugay nagpundo ng mga substance diha, the longer the rock material has been exposed to any factors of weathering, the greater the degree of weathering and the more developed the soil is produced. Okay? So time is also a factor. Summary of soil formation. If you can still remember, you have conducted an activity about how soil is formed. So maybe I will just have to wrap this up sa inyong activity. In your activity, your science teacher have given you that activity already, so probably you can still recall this picture. Isa na sa mga picture nga inyong gi-discussan among your groups, right? So maybe you can see the sun, and the sun is exposing heat towards the rocks, and what will happen? So that is the thing that you have actually discussed. Unsa ginahitabuan nga picture. So when we look at that picture, atong mahuna-hunaan gyud, when a piece of rock is exposed to the sun, its outer part expands. Ang iyang outer part expands because it heats up faster, mas muinit ang iyang surface kaysa sa inner part. There will be expansion of the surface of the rocks because the surface heats up faster compared to the inner part. May tabuan na, expand ang sa gawas, ang sa sulod dili kay siya ma-expand. What will happen? The rock would break. Mabungkag ang rock. And that is what we call weathering in general. So, another picture that you have also tried looking at during your activity is this one. Natay makita diri nga bulan, that means this took place during nighttime. So, the moon represents nighttime. And what happens also? On cooling at night, the nighttime, the outer part of the rock contracts and shrinks because the outer part of the rock cools faster. So, mas mubugnaw na pud og paspas ang outer part of the rock than the inner part. So, muana na pud siya. So, what do you think will happen then? Inikabuntag, in the previous picture, muinit og paspas mo expand ang gawas kaysa sa inner part. Pero kagabi, paspas po ni muana. What will happen if there will be constant daytime heating and cooling, heating and cooling, heating and cooling? So, heating and cooling every day and night, constant shifting of day and night, would lead for the rock to break apart on the surface. When it breaks apart sa surface, kani siya will degrade ng mga portions of the rock. And this one again will eventually go through the process. And later on, the constant doing of this eventually lead to the breaking of the rock. So you see, you can see the picture there. The outer layer is being peeled out from the inner layer of the rock. And how much more? Kung ano to'y crack daan, because of the heating and constant expansion and contraction of the rock's outer layer, surface layer, and there is already a crack, and rain will take place. Some of this water will zip into this particular crack, na ito yung mga crack daan, and water will go into that particular cracks, and the substance which are there on the water will trigger chemical reaction, and chemical weathering will take place. One example for that, the one that I'm talking about a while ago, could be hydrolysis, no? Water will react and hydrolysis will take place, and hydrogen will react to the substance in the rock, the oxygen will react, and eventually there could be breaking of the rock. And sometimes it can also lead into hydration. Hydration is what we call another process, also the one that you have seen a while ago. And we have here, air could also enter the crack, and oxygen in the air combines with some elements such as iron to produce iron oxide. Kaning ato ang rocks probably contains iron. Some of the components of the rock itself are iron. And when iron reacts with oxygen, it will form iron oxide or ferrous oxide. And this is what we call rust or kalawang, which is brittle and would easily peel off. So this could actually lead into the degradation and breaking of the rock. And sometimes carbon dioxide could also zip into the cracks, causing this carbon dioxide to react with some substances of the rock, as well as with the bacteria and plants. Sometimes kaning mga seeds will get inside the cracks, and it will trigger into the formation of acidic substances. So the bacteria will produce acid, and it will lead into the breaking of the rock. So this time, I will be showing you a video presentation, or somewhat like a summary of what really would take place. No, something like a short video presentation. So please watch the video presentation shortly. So thank you for watching that video. This time, we will continue with our discussion. And as you can see, because of the weathering process, many processes exhibited by the rocks, and it leads into the formation of the soil. So the video itself allows you to fully understand how the rocks is formed based from our discussion and the video that you have just watched. Moto siya ang formation of the soil. And when soil is already formed, depending upon the process nga iyang go through, it could lead into the formation of many types of soil. Na po yung mga lain-lain ng mga types of soil. So what are these types of soil that we are going to observe from our natural environment? First type of soil that I would like to share with you is what we call the silt. So another thing is loam soil. You're familiar with this because you've been learning this from elementary grades. Humus, another type of soil, sandy soil, and clay. So let us try to individually look into all of these 5 types of common types of soil. The slate, the loam, this humus, sandy, and clay. Silt. Silt is a sediment material with an intermediate size between sand and clay. So na siya murag a little bit sandy, murag siya sandy, pero na po siya murag clay, murag tunga-tunga siya. So carried by water during flood in forms of fertile deposit on valleys floor. Silt is easily compacted. Kana bitong mga silt kay mo na siya tong common nga mga ginagamit, no? Sometimes we usually get some of the soil and we mold them to form several structures during our younger days. So silt ang tawag ana di ay. But silt is actually some having sediment materials within, no, in the structure of the soil. Another type of soil is kaning loam. Loam is a mixture of clay, sand, and silt. So mura siya clay, gahi mo gyud ang clay. Dali ra kay magpilit gid siya, no? Sandy, dili pa siya magpilit, then ang silt kitong atunga nila. So a mixture of these three will form the so-called loam soil. And it benefits from the qualities of these 3 different textures. And sometimes, loam soil is also essential because it favors water retention, air circulation, and drainage and fertility. That is why loam soil is also very beneficial among plants, because loam soil could actually aid in the vegetation, which means it can actually help a lot, no, in terms of making the plant alive. So it favors water retention, air circulation. Air is actually essential for the plant itself, and it allows also drainage and fertility of the soil. So nindot na siyang loam gamiton. But I would like to share with you humus. Humus is a highly complex substance, still not fully understood. It is a stable and uniformly dark, spongy, and amorphous material which come from mechanical degradation of organic matter. So sometimes kaning humus mo ni siya ang common nga mga makita nato during kanang bitong namamatay nga mga living things, animals for example. Itom ni siya kaayo, and then a mixture of that, no? And humus is very, very fertile and gather all properties suitable for optimal plant growth. Which means when we are going to talk about optimal plant growth, much applicable is the humus. When you are going to use the humus in your gardens, it could actually aid in optimal, suitable kay siya for plant growth. So if you say loam soil is also useful for plant growth, pwede siya, much better good ang humus. So it is formed by complex chemical compounds of plants, animals, and microbial origin. So these are actually the things that is there on the humus. And another type of soil that I would like to share with you is kaning gitawag na tog sandy soil. Sige na pud balik akong suga. Sandy soil, from the word itself, there is composed of sand. It is comparative large size, does not have a chemical valence, capability to interact with charged particles, therefore does not hold materials in the soil. Water molecules find as well easily their way through sand and get away by the action of gravity. So the advantage of sand is its permeability to plants, plant roots. Kay dili man kayo dugul-dugul ang mga structure sa sandy soil, sa sand, probably dali ra kay maka-zip in ang mga roots dito padulong sa ilalom. But ang problema niya, dili kay siya maka-hold og mga water. That is a disadvantage. Pero dali ra makasuksok ang mga roots. Compared to clay, for example, o katong sa loam soil, o katong slate, maglisod pa sila ato because some of the soil structures are actually compact, dugul, so maglisod og sulod ang roots. But here in the sandy soil, plant roots can easily sink in, no? The inconvenience of sand is that it's poor water and plant nutrient retention. Dili kay niya ma-retain ang mga nutrients o ang water on the soil itself. So when cultivating with sandy soil, a lot of organic matter needs to be present in the soil to store moisture and nutrients. So another type of soil is kani. Has super fine particles that cling together, mag-cling together and prohibit water and nutrients movement. Di na gyud makaagi kay pilit yun kay sila. Dugol kayo ang mga structures. So while sand has coarse particles which allows water and nutrients to leach too rapidly, ang clay pod on the other hand is opposite. It cannot allow water retention and nutrient movement. So dili jud maayo ang clay. So what do you think kung magtanom ka if you would like to plant, which soil is best suited for you to plant? Kanibang clay? Or katubang sandy? Sandy pod loose pod kayo or a mixture ang slate or ang loam or ang humus. So what do you think is the best way? Okay, this time that ends our discussion on soil formation and weathering, as well as the add-up discussion on the different types of soil. So it's high time for us to have just a short test. No, we will just have a short test. I want you to prepare one half crosswise lang, and when I flash these particular questions, you can pause the video, and then copy the questions and try to answer the questions. You can even review, or you can even rewind the video that you have just seen from the very beginning or in the middle, whatever portions you would like, just to come up with a correct answer to these questions that I'm going to pose. And good thing, you can give these particular answers of yours in a one half crosswise to your science teacher, and your science teacher will eventually give you additional points. For example, if you fail in lots of your quizzes during the entire grading period, then you can submit this particular paper to your teacher and try to see if your answers are correct. Now, kung correct, then you will be given points, and that could help you much in passing science, grade 7 science, and you can proceed to grade 8 later. Okay? So I'm going to show now to you the questions, and copy the questions, answer the questions in a one half crosswise. If you would like to review or rewind the video for you to come up with an answer, pwede. You can do that. As long as you come up with an answer and give your answers to your teacher. Is that clear? So, have your answers now. Let me show to you the question. These are the questions. Okay, pause the video now. Copy the answers. Copy the questions. Review the video for you to come up with an answer of this. So, thank you very much for listening. And your friendly science teacher from Zamboanga del Sur National High School would say, enjoy learning science.